The Tower of London is one of the most haunted places in England. It was built in 1066 by William the Conqueror, and over the next 800 years it became a prison, a torture chamber, an execution ground, and eventually a museum. All that death and suffering has left some serious negative energy in this place. And today, visitors report experiencing all kinds of strange things, from ghostly apparitions to disembodied screams in the dead of night. And if these stories are true, there are ghosts here who have no intention of moving on. In fact, there's one ghost who might be haunting the tower still, even now, waiting for his chance at revenge. His name was Guy Fawkes, and he was one of the main conspirators in the gunpowder plot. The plan was to blow up the Houses of Parliament with 36 barrels of gunpowder hidden beneath them. The motive was basically just blowing off some steam. King James I had come into power when Queen Elizabeth I died, and he'd been ruling like a total dick ever since. The Catholics in England were sick of it. They'd had enough of his anti-Catholic rhetoric, and they'd had enough of his laws, which forbade them from practicing their religion freely. So they hatched a plan to assassinate him and put his 9-year-old daughter on the throne instead. The Catholics thought that a child could easily be converted to Catholicism, and then they would finally have the upper hand in England. But the plot was betrayed before anything could happen, and on November 5, 1605, Guy Fawkes was arrested while trying to sneak into Parliament. He was taken to the Tower of London and tortured until he confessed his crime and implicated his co-conspirators. Then he was sent to a church where he was hanged, drawn, and quartered. That means that his limbs were broken before his eyes and then torn off his body one by one while he was still alive. After that, his bits were put on display around London to warn other would-be traitors of the consequences of their actions. Now, obviously, that is insane. But even after all those centuries, people still get creeped out thinking about what happened here. And we have the ghost of one conspirator to thank for that. Visitors to the tower have reported hearing the sound of dragging chains coming from the top of the White Tower. And some say the sound is made by Guy Fawkes himself, whose ghost is forever doomed to drag his chains around the tower as punishment for his crimes. Of course, that's just one story among many. There are plenty of other legends about the tower that may or may not be true, but are still pretty freaking spooky. One of the most famous legends involves two lovers named Margaret Clitheroe and Thomas Bridges. They fell in love during the 17th century, but their romance was doomed from the start because Margaret was the daughter of a wealthy family who disapproved of Thomas. He wasn't good enough for her. And, sure enough, her father locked her up in the tower and hired armed guards to keep her from leaving. Poor Thomas tried everything he could to get her out. He scaled the walls and snuck her food through her window. He bribed the guards, and he even pretended to be a woman so he could smuggle himself inside. But none of it worked. Eventually he gave up and took his own life, and shortly after, Margaret died of a broken heart. Ever since, visitors have reported seeing the ghosts of these star-crossed lovers wandering the grounds of the tower, especially near the gatehouse where they're said to have met for the last time. Sometimes they even see the ghost of Margaret's father, Sir Robert Clitheroe, who is said to wander the site looking for his missing daughter. But there's another ghost who's even more persistent than that, and he's been haunting this place for hundreds of years. People call him the Grey Lady, and he's one of the most famous ghosts in all of England. Visitors have been reporting sightings of him since the 19th century, and he never sticks around for long. He's always just sort of floating through the halls, appearing and disappearing at random. At first, no one knew who the Grey Lady was. There were so many ghosts at the tower, it was hard to keep track. But in 2003, someone finally identified him. Historical records show that back in 1684, a courtier named Anne Boleyn was living in the tower with her young son, King James II. She was so depressed that she spent all day staring out the window, and as a result, people started calling her the Grey Lady because she always looked so sullen. Eventually, she got so bad that her servants had to carry her to bed every night, and soon after, She died of smallpox. Now, some historians argue that Anne Boleyn and the Grey Lady are actually two different people. Maybe it was just a coincidence that there was a sad lady living in the tower who preferred to stay in her room all day. But others believe that the Grey Lady really is the ghost of Anne Boleyn, who was probably pretty unhappy about the way she spent her last days in the tower. Whatever the truth is, the Grey Lady isn't the only ghost here connected to Anne. You see, her son, King James II, also spent a lot of time in the tower. He grew up there, hiding in the secret passageways and playing games in the chapel. But when he got older, his life got a whole lot darker. In 1688, his sister Mary brought him to the tower and imprisoned him because she wanted to take the throne herself. Luckily for James, a group of rebel soldiers rescued him and smuggled him out of the country. When word got out that he'd been kidnapped, the public turned on Mary, and just 7 months later, she was dead. James returned to England and became the king. But he never forgot how close he came to losing his life in the tower, and as a result, he hired a team of architects to turn it into a palace. He planted trees and fountains throughout the courtyard and hung portraits of his favorite courtiers on the walls. He wanted everyone to feel welcome here. But some people believe that he also wanted to make the tower more hospitable to its ghosts. After all, he was known to be a bit of a psychic, and maybe he felt bad about all the spirits that were trapped here. Another reason that James might have wanted to improve the tower was because he had a personal connection to some of the ghosts that haunted it. Back in 1688, when he was hiding from his sister Mary, he sought refuge in a small apartment near the entrance to the tower. This apartment was supposedly haunted by the ghost of a young girl named Elizabeth Boleyn, who died in the 1500s, and James believed that her ghost could help protect him while he was hiding there. You see, Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, but she was never supposed to exist in the first place. Her mother lost the king's favor, and he had her executed when Elizabeth was only 2 years old, so she grew up knowing that she might end up in prison, or worse, just like her mother. As a result, she developed severe anxiety and died prematurely. Now, if James believed that Elizabeth's ghost could help protect him, it must mean that he believed that she was powerful. And if that's true, imagine what he must have thought of the ghosts of the 2 executed Boleyns that haunted the White Tower. You see, the Boleyns weren't the only royals who suffered at the hands of Henry VIII. In fact, he killed 2 of his wives, and both of their ghosts are said to roam the tower still. The first was Anne Boleyn, who was executed in 1536 after being accused of adultery. The second was Catherine Howard, who was executed in 1542 after she admitted to having an affair. Some say their ghosts appear as shadows in the windows of the tower or whispering voices in the dead of night. And even though it's been centuries since they died, they are still somehow tied to this place. So if you want to learn more about the ghosts of the tower, you can visit for yourself. The tower is open to the public all year round, and if you're lucky, you might be able to catch one of the rare performances of the tower's resident ghost. Just remember to bring your ghost detector.